What is going on YouTube? Is FlopFish here, and welcome to an NHL 14 gameplay commentary, but this one is all about the commentary, and I highly suggest if you are a hockey fan to sit back and listen to it, because it is definitely something that is very relevant right now, and it is, should fighting be in hockey? And given the recent events yesterday of George Parros missing a punch in a fight with Colton Orr, hitting the ice hard, and being knocked unconscious by the fall, it definitely brought back the whole argument, should fighting be in hockey again, which was relatively dormant for a little bit, which really only started up in 2010-11ish after the deaths of NHLers such as Derek Boogaard, Rick Rippon, and Wade Belak. Really brought attention to, and the whole concussion studies actually too, really brought attention to what harmful effects fighting has, and ultimately it led to a whole bunch of people who, I'd say a good majority of them probably didn't watch hockey, but it led to a lot of people saying, you know what, we need fighting removed from hockey. And again, it led to a lot of the diehard hockey fans saying, you know what, we need fighting in hockey still, because it's a way for players to self-police themselves, and if you take it out, you're going to have much more serious injuries, like such as stick swinging incidents and sucker punches. Now, that being said, we still have those in the NHL. And again, they're about as frequent overseas, so it'd be interesting to see if fighting was removed, if that would increase or not, because there's no real statistic to prove that, or no real actual information factor. There's no fact saying this is a direct result. Now, that being said, there probably is some sort of correlation between the two right now, but yeah, anyways. Ultimately, I think that you're going to see a huge changing in the guard, and it's kind of evident right now with Scotty Bowman, Steve Yzerman saying, you know what, maybe we need to look at fighting again, and Steve Yzerman suggested players get a game misconduct for fighting. That's what he believes in, and ultimately, you know what, it's a belief that we should probably respect and take into account the fact that, you know what, he played in the NHL for quite a long time, and he's a very well-respected player, and for him to say something like that definitely signals there will be a change in the next coming years. Don't forget, in 2011-12 there was a player vote, and 98% were in favor of fighting in hockey. Only 2% weren't, and I would be more than willing to put a lot of money on the line saying that if they were to put out that same poll, there'd be less players now, at least probably 5-10% less that said fighting doesn't belong in hockey, which, you know, is pretty significant, because probably 5 years ago, I'd say probably the same thing was true about hybrid icing, where the majority of players didn't really care for it or didn't want it. Guess what we have now this year, about 5 years from now, or 5 years from then, and we have hybrid icing now as voted on by the players. So times change, views change, and opinions change, and ultimately I think the opinion on fighting will change within players, and you can see that in Vinny LeCavalier yesterday. He was asked about it, and he hesitated before saying yes. The little bit of hesitation was something that not a lot of people had before, and ultimately it is going to bring up a lot of discussion. It's going to be very interesting to see what comes out of it. But anyway, so pretty much the whole fighting and pro and no fighting argument has a complete two opposite sides, where you're either really for it or really against it, and ultimately I think you very rarely see people in the middle. And you ultimately see a lot of people who are on the pro side saying it's always been in the game. And then you see a lot of people on the other side saying, you know what, there's some pretty significant injuries from it. Maybe it needs to be looked at. And ultimately, I do agree with both sides of it. There's nothing that can get a crowd more pumped up, a hometown crowd, than a fight. I don't know if there's an event in sport that happens where you can get 16,000 fans just by dropping the gloves on their feet, giving a standing ovation, no matter who it is. And it's just something that happens, and it's just like, it's one of the best feelings in sport when you're one of those fans, and you're seeing all these players stand up. It's actually pretty cool. Now, that being said, on the other side, there definitely is a lot of injury concerns with all the concussions, and ultimately the head trauma and brain trauma caused by them. And it's definitely a very, very, very valid point that needs to be taken into consideration, especially since we're only just finding out about concussions and kind of what they do, the harmful effects of it, the kind of after effects of it, And ultimately, one of the things we do know is that concussions happen more and more frequently. After you get the first one, you're more likely to get a second one, and so on and so forth. But nonetheless, I think it's actually a pretty good thing to talk about right now. And I think one of the things we're going to see is, as mentioned by the hybrid icing rule change, you're seeing rules brought in. They seem insignificant right now, but I guarantee in 5 years or so they're going to play a huge role in eliminating some parts of fighting. And these rules that I'm talking about are wearing as the grandfathering of visors in, so any rookie has to wear a visor in. Well, there's also a rule right now that if you have a visor and instigate a fight, you get an extra 2 minutes. So there's a rule brought in to kind of compensate another rule against fighting. Also, you cannot remove your helmet in a fight right now, otherwise you get an extra penalty. And again, that's just brought in to protect player safety, something that is at the forefront of NHL politics, which is obviously, has always and will always be is protecting player safety. Because guess what? If you start running out of these players, it's not going to be a very entertaining league anymore. And it's definitely going to be very interesting to see what happens and see what comes out of it. But again, my general overview on it is that if they're going to remove any aspect of fighting within the next few years or so, remove stage fighting. Again, stage fighting, in my opinion, doesn't have a ton of room in hockey. I can see fighting in there as a way to police players. I do think it is an alright way to police players, but ultimately I think stage fighting is something that, you know what, probably could go. I don't think it's exactly necessary in the game anymore. Again, a lot of people probably will and won't agree with me there, but it's just something that, again, in my opinion, does need to go, because there's a lot of injuries that happen from it, and maybe we should definitely look at it and try to prevent as many injuries as we can from fan perspective, from a player's perspective. You want your players to be happy and you want them to be healthy, because guess what? Healthy or injured players are kind of useless, right? Anyways, that's kind of my thoughts on it. Ultimately, I wouldn't be shocked at all to see stage fighting removed in 5 years, and ultimately I wouldn't be surprised to see a huge change in fighting in 10-15 years. Maybe fighting will be removed for good in 10-15 years. Who knows? It's going to be a huge change upcoming, and it's going to be interesting to see what happens. But I want to know your guys' opinion. Should fighting be in hockey? Let me know in the comment section below. Anyways, take it easy and peace out.